What? I have been nothing but welcoming to you since the day you moved in, and you have done nothing but disrespect me. You think you can keep turning me down like I am nobody in this community? If you do not agree to go on a date with me, I will push every fine on your account straight to foreclosure. I will make sure your furniture is on the street before the end of the month. I have the authority to do it. And I absolutely will. Homeowners Association President Eleanor Vance had spent 3 weeks being unusually attentive to the new homeowner at 42 Whispering Pines Court. She kept stopping by with welcome gifts, suggesting they catch a movie together, and then directly asking him for coffee when he politely declined her very first invitation. When he told her on the second occasion that he respected her position but did not have romantic feelings toward her, she told him he had made a serious mistake and angrily walked away. The violation notices began arriving the following Monday. What she didn't know was that the homeowner had documented every single advance she had made long before the fines even began. She didn't know 2 neighbors had witnessed the confrontation where she told him he could not simply turn her down, and that the harassment case his attorney filed would remove her from the board forever. Julian Brooks, 34, a structural engineer for a mid-sized construction firm based out of Denver, had closed on his home at 42 Whispering Pines Court in the Stonebridge Commons subdivision. He moved to Centennial, Colorado, 6 weeks before any of this started. Stonebridge Commons sat in Arapahoe County, a middle-class neighborhood of matching brick homes and pine-lined streets. It was the kind of community where people maintained their properties and kept reasonable hours. Julian had bought his home as his first property after years of exhausting apartment living. He moved in with nothing more on his mind than a quiet place to come home to after long days on construction job sites. He was installing weather stripping on his front door on a Saturday morning. That was when Eleanor Vance introduced herself. She was 54, well-dressed, and carried herself with the comfortable authority of someone who had been the most important person in a small space. She welcomed him to the neighborhood, handed him a small gift bag containing a candle and a copy of the HOA guidelines, and told him her door was always open if he needed absolutely anything. Julian thanked her genuinely and went back to his weather stripping. He thought nothing of it. She came back the following Saturday with a plate of warm cookies and stayed for 20 minutes. She lingered on his porch, talking endlessly about the neighborhood. Then she came back the Wednesday after that. Julian began noticing that she stopped by his property more than any other house. Her manner toward him was undeniably warmer than anything a standard HOA welcome required. Other neighbors had mentioned her in passing, using words like difficult and controlling quite often. But toward Julian, she had been nothing but pleasant, and he chose to take that at face value. Then, she asked him to go see a movie with her. She framed it casually, but the meaning was clear. Julian paused, set down the glass he was holding, and told her as kindly as he could that he appreciated the gesture, but he was not in a place for that kind of thing right now. Eleanor smiled tightly, said she understood, and quickly left. The street was quiet again, and Julian honestly thought that was the end of it. Unfortunately, it was not the end of it at all. Before we go further, what city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where you're tuning in from. If you believe authority shouldn't be used for personal pressure, hit like and subscribe, and join us on HOA Unhinged. 2 weeks after the movie invitation, Eleanor came back. She knocked on Julian's door on a Sunday afternoon. When he answered, she suggested they go for coffee together later that week. She said they should go somewhere low-key, just the 2 of them, nothing formal. Julian looked at her, and this time he was much more direct. He told her that he did not see her in a romantic way. He explained that he valued a good relationship with his neighbors and with the HOA, but he was not interested in pursuing anything personal with her, and he genuinely hoped she could respect that. Eleanor's expression changed. It wasn't dramatic. There was no raised voice or a slammed door. It was just a cold shift behind the eyes that a person notices when they are truly paying attention. She told him that she was not the kind of woman who simply got turned down in her own community. She told him he had made a serious mistake and that he would understand the consequences soon enough. Then, she walked off his porch and across Whispering Pines Court without looking back once. The very first violation notice arrived in his mailbox the following Monday morning. It cited grass height exceeding the Stonebridge Commons HOA maximum along his front border. It was a measurement Eleanor had apparently taken herself over the weekend while sneaking around his lawn. Julian went outside with a tape measure immediately and recorded his own measurements across 5 separate points along the border. Every single reading came in well under the permitted height. He photographed each measurement, photographed the fake notice, and put both in a secure folder. The second notice arrived just 3 days later. It was an absurd parking infraction. It cited his vehicle as being positioned too close to the edge of his driveway under Section 4.3 of the guidelines. Julian pulled up Section 4.3 that evening and read the entire rule carefully. He found it only covered guest parking in common areas and said absolutely nothing about private driveways. He added it to the growing folder. Over the following 3 weeks, 8 more notices arrived. There were noise complaints against a man who lived alone and kept his music at a level his immediate neighbors had never once mentioned. There was an exterior modification citation for a doormat. It was a doormat she had already approved for every other resident on the street. There was a landscaping violation for a bush that had been the exact same size since the day he moved in. The fines ranged from $150 to $750 each, and the total accumulated against his deed quickly climbed past $6,000. Julian paid absolutely none of it. Instead, he went back through his phone. He found the text messages Eleanor had sent him between her 2 visits. They were messages that were warm and personal, and had absolutely nothing to do with official HOA business or guidelines. He lined them up against the dates of the violation notices, and the pattern was immediate and obvious. Every single fine had arrived within days of a romantic rejection. The connection required no interpretation. He called an attorney that Friday and brought everything with him. He brought the folder, the text messages, the timeline, and the names of 2 neighbors. These were the neighbors who had been standing outside when Eleanor told him he had made a serious mistake. Julian's attorney was a civil litigation specialist named Rachel Dalton, based out of Denver. Rachel reviewed everything he brought in and told him the case had 3 distinct legal layers, and all 3 were incredibly serious. The first was straightforward malicious HOA harassment. It involved fabricated violation notices with no bylaw basis, issued in a documented pattern following personal rejections. The second layer was a severe abuse of institutional authority. She was using an HOA presidency as a coercion tool to pressure a resident into a personal relationship. The third was the most significant of the 3, the illegal foreclosure threat. Eleanor had made this threat in a text message sent 10 days after the coffee rejection. She told Julian his unpaid balance was approaching lien territory, and she had full authority to pursue his property. This met the strict legal definition of coercion under Colorado revised statutes. The 18th of March, 602. This gave the case a massive criminal dimension that went well beyond a standard, everyday HOA dispute. Rachel filed the civil lawsuit in the Arapahoe County District Court on a Tuesday morning. The legal filing was 38 pages long, and it was devastatingly precise in its accusations. It listed every violation notice by date and cross-referenced each one against the romantic rejection it followed. It included the full embarrassing text message exchange between Eleanor and Julian. It also attached sworn statements from both neighbors who had witnessed the confrontation on Whispering Pines Court, where Eleanor had angrily told Julian he had made a serious mistake. The filing described a clear and documented pattern of retaliatory enforcement. It was used as a mechanism of personal coercion, and it asked the court to declare every single fine unenforceable. It demanded damages for harassment and requested the court refer the coercion element to the Arapahoe County District Attorney's Office for a full criminal review. The board received their copy that day. 3 board members read it that evening and panicked, calling an emergency session for the following morning. At that session, one board member asked to see the explicit text messages Rachel attached. The room went dead quiet when the exhibits were passed around. Nobody defended Eleanor. Nobody asked for her side of the story. They had already read the undeniable truth in her own exact words. Eleanor Vance hired a defense attorney by the end of that week. The retainer fee alone cost her $22,000. The Arapahoe County District Court quickly ruled in Julian Brooks's favor on every single count. Every violation notice Eleanor had filed against 42 Whispering Pines Court was declared unenforceable. The full accumulated balance of $6,000 in fabricated fines was dismissed entirely by the judge. The court found a clear and documented pattern of retaliatory enforcement directly connected to Julian's rejection of Eleanor's personal advances. They entered that finding into the public record. It would remain in the Arapahoe County District Court, permanently attached to her name. The damages awarded to Julian comfortably covered his full legal fees, plus massive compensation for the harassment. It also covered the documented emotional and financial stress of the malicious campaign Eleanor had run against his property. The coercion element Rachel had flagged was referred to the district attorney. A formal criminal investigation was instantly opened against Eleanor under Colorado revised statutes. The 18th of March, 602. This added a layer of severe consequence that her civil attorney had no ability to manage. The Stonebridge Commons HOA board removed Eleanor from the presidency the exact same day the judgment was handed down. The vote was completely unanimous and executed without a single moment of debate. They commissioned a full audit of every enforcement action she had taken during her tenure. The audit found 7 other residents who had received disproportionate violation notices during her time. 3 of them immediately filed their own legal actions in the months that followed, using Rachel Dalton's brilliant filing as a template. Eleanor's expensive legal fees completely consumed her. Between the civil case, the criminal investigation, and the HOA audit proceedings, she lost everything she had saved in 9 years. She listed her home on the market 8 months after the judgment. She left Centennial without making a single announcement or saying goodbye to anyone on Whispering Pines Court. Julian Brooks answered his door on a quiet Saturday morning to find nothing unusual. There were no violation notices. There were no uninvited visitors. There were absolutely no text messages from anyone holding a lanyard and a clipboard. The neighborhood was finally peaceful. He made fresh coffee, sat on his front porch, and happily enjoyed the kind of quiet, relaxing morning a man is supposed to have in a home he worked incredibly hard to own. If this story reminded you that a title is not a license and a position of authority was never meant to be used as personal leverage over another person, share this video with someone who needs it. And if you have a story of your own about a crazy HOA president who crossed lines that had nothing to do with community standards, drop it in the comments. Every story deserves to be told. See you on the next one right here on HOA Unhinged.